Imagine waking up at noon to find the sky is still pitch black and the sun has simply refused to rise. That is exactly what happened to a man named Arthur in a small valley town where the light just stopped working. But the darkness in the sky was nothing compared to the scratching sounds coming from the dirt floor beneath his feet. Most people think their crawl space is just a place for spiders and old pipes. But Arthur was about to find something much worse. What started as a strange weather event turned into a fight for survival against a creature that had been waiting for the light to die. By the end of this story, you will understand why Arthur never wants to be in the dark ever again. Arthur Miller lived in a quiet house in rural Oregon where nothing much ever happened and neighbors mostly kept to themselves. He was a simple guy who worked at the local library and spent his weekends fixing up his old wooden house. One Tuesday morning in October, he woke up and checked his alarm clock, which said it was 8 in the morning. He looked out his bedroom window expecting to see the morning sun hitting the pine trees, but everything was black. It was not just cloudy or foggy, it was like someone had put a giant heavy blanket over the entire world. He stepped outside onto his porch and noticed the birds were completely silent, and the air felt cold and very heavy. He turned on his porch light, but the bulb just flickered and died, leaving him in total silence and absolute darkness. Arthur checked his phone and saw that the news was blowing up with reports of a freak atmospheric event. Scientists were calling it a localized total eclipse, but they could not explain why it was lasting for hours instead of minutes. As the hours passed, the temperature began to drop and a strange smell of wet earth began to fill his living room. That was when he heard it for the first time, a slow, rhythmic scratching sound coming from right under his floorboards. It did not sound like a rat or a raccoon, because whatever was making this noise sounded heavy and very slow. Arthur grabbed his heavy-duty flashlight and headed toward the small wooden door in his hallway that led to the crawl space. His house was built in the early 1920s, and the foundation was mostly just stone and packed dirt with very little room to move. He knelt down and opened the small door, feeling a rush of cold air that smelled like old copper and stagnant water. He shined his light into the darkness, and the beam hit the dirt floor about 10 feet away from where he stood. At first, everything looked normal with the usual cobwebs and dusty pipes running along the wooden beams above. Then he saw a row of deep gouges in the dirt that looked like someone had been digging with giant fingers. The scratches led from the back corner of the house toward a dark hole that Arthur had never noticed before. He told himself it was probably just a broken pipe or a sinkhole, but the scratching sound started up again right then. It was coming from inside that new hole, and it sounded like something was dragging a heavy wet bag through the mud. Arthur felt a chill run down his spine that had nothing to do with the cold air coming out of the ground. He knew he should just lock the door and leave, but the darkness outside meant he had nowhere safe to go. The power in the town was starting to fail, and his flashlight was the only thing standing between him and the void. He decided he had to know what was under his house before the batteries in his light finally gave out on him. He put on his thick work gloves and crawled through the small opening, feeling the damp dirt press against his chest. The space was so tight he could barely turn his head, and the silence of the world outside felt like it was crushing him. As he got closer to the hole in the corner, he noticed something shiny reflecting the light of his flickering flashlight. It looked like pieces of broken glass or maybe old jewelry mixed into the loose soil near the edge of the pit. Arthur reached out and picked up a small metal object and realized it was a silver wedding ring from many years ago. He remembered hearing stories about people going missing in this valley back in the 50s, but those were just local legends. Now he was looking at proof that someone had been dragged into the darkness under this very house a long time ago. He shined his light directly into the pit and saw that it went down much deeper than the foundation of the home. It was a tunnel that had been dug by something with very long claws and a lot of strength to move the heavy rocks. Down in the shadows, he saw two pale eyes reflect the light, and they did not look like animal eyes at all. They were wide and milky white, like the eyes of a fish that has lived in a deep, dark cave for 1,000 years. The creature didn't blink or move away. It just stared back at Arthur with a strange kind of hungry curiosity. Arthur froze in place, and his heart was beating so loud he thought the thing under the house could hear it. The creature let out a low hissing sound that sounded like steam escaping a pipe, and it began to crawl upward. It moved with a jerky snapping motion, as if its bones were clicking into place with every single step it took. Arthur scrambled backward as fast as he could, kicking up dust and dirt as he struggled to find the exit door. His flashlight hit the wooden beams and flickered once or twice before the beam turned a weak shade of orange. He could hear the creature getting closer, and the sound of its claws on the wood sounded like knives on a plate. He finally reached the small door and pulled himself out into the hallway, slamming the wooden hatch shut and locking it. He pushed his heavy kitchen table over the door and stood there breathing hard, while his hands shook uncontrollably. Outside the window, the sky was still pitch black, and the town felt like it had been erased from the map. He realized the darkness outside wasn't an accident, it was an invitation for whatever lived below to finally come up. For the next 6 hours, Arthur sat in his living room with a kitchen knife in one hand and his dying light in the other. He could hear the creature hitting the bottom of the floorboards, trying to find a weak spot in the old wood. It wandered from the kitchen to the bedroom and back again, following the sound of his breathing through the floor. Every time the creature moved, Arthur felt the house tremble, as if the foundation itself was starting to crumble away. He started to wonder how many of these things were out there in the valley, hiding under other people's homes. The news on his phone had stopped updating, and the only sound on the radio was a long, steady tone of static. Just when he thought the floor was going to give way, he saw a tiny sliver of grey light through the curtains. The sun was finally starting to push through the heavy black clouds, and the shadows in the room began to thin. As the light grew stronger, he heard a loud shriek from under the floorboards, followed by a frantic digging sound. The creature was retreating back into its tunnel, terrified of the light that was slowly returning to the valley. Arthur did not wait for the sun to fully rise before he grabbed his car keys and ran out the front door. He didn't grab any clothes or money, he just wanted to get as far away from that patch of dirt as possible. When he looked back at his house, he saw a pale hand pull back into the crawl space vent just before the sun hit it. He drove for 3 hours until he reached a city where the sky was blue and people were walking around normally. He never went back to that house, and he sold it to a developer for a very low price just to get it out of his name. The developer later reported that they found a massive cave system under the property, but they never found any animals. Arthur still keeps every light in his new apartment turned on all night, because he knows the darkness is patient. It doesn't matter how bright the sun is today, because eventually the light always fades and the scratching starts again. If you ever hear something moving under your feet in the middle of the night, do not go looking for it. Some things are meant to stay buried in the dirt, and some secrets are better left in the dark where they belong. Check out this next video to see another story of someone who found something they were never supposed to see.